In mid-January of 2020, Chantal and I were coming back from visiting our grandparents in Katoomba. It was just after a lot of those catastrophic bushfires, you might remember them, where 6% of New South Wales burned. Maybe you remember the thick cloud of smoke. This was just before COVID hit. It was like that time where there was one catastrophe after the other. Um, and that smoke cloud went all the way to New Zealand, even. Uh, We'd heard that the Bells line of road had reopened, and we thought we'd check it out and buy some local honey or cider to support the local businesses that had been hit. It was pretty eerie as we were driving down the Bells line of road. Black trees everywhere, burnt out road signs. We wondered if it'd ever grow back. Well, sure enough, it did. You might remember within months, there were signs of new growth, new life, new shoots from charred tree stumps. On eucalyptus trees like this is a picture from the area of the Gospers fire. We see what's called epicormic growth on the trunks of eucalyptus trees. It's beautiful. And if you're an Aussie, you're like, yeah, I hear this all the time. We know this. This is part of what it means to be Australian. We know that our bush regenerates like this. Tell me something I don't know. But it's no less amazing, isn't it? Life from death. And Isaiah's prophecy is famous for this picture, not because it's trying to say something about the incredible power of Australian flora to regenerate after fire, but because it's trying to say something about God's promise of a new king. Even after the fire of God's wrath and judgment has passed through, even when kings and nations have been humbled and cut down to stumps, there would be a king who grew from the ashes. If you're joining us in this sermon series, the prophet Isaiah is set in the 8th century BCE. It's a long, long time ago when the nation of Assyria in the north was about to execute God's judgment on his people for their idolatry and rebellion. The Davidic royal line, which was like a great tree that God had planted by his eternal promise to David to represent his rule and to be the king over his people, it was being hacked at, cut down. The northern kingdom had already fallen to Assyria in 722 BCE, and Jerusalem now was under threat. And in the context of Isaiah, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the king sitting on David's throne, like Ahaz, they were failing and scared and turning to foreign powers rather than trusting in the Holy One of Israel. Into that inferno, Isaiah the prophet spoke. And the image he reached for was a stump. A stump. I hope you got to admire Mike's great handiwork on the way in this morning as he found that stump out the back of the church over the week. But it's not David's stump that Isaiah talks about. It's Jesse's stump, who was David's father. And what Isaiah is trying to say is that he's trying to go back to the humble origins of David in Bethlehem. The tree of Davidic kingship had been cut so low it looked like it was finished now. But God had not finished with them. A shoot would still come. The first thing Isaiah says about this coming king is what sets him apart as God's king. The Spirit of the Lord would rest on him. Not just visit him, but rest, remain on him. Isaiah unpacks this spirit endowment in these three beautiful pairs. Wisdom and understanding, which is the intellectual discernment to know what is true. Counsel and might, which is that practical and kind of executive power to know what to do, discernment, and when to actually do it. Then there's the knowledge and the fear of the Lord, which is that relational, devotional heart that knows God. You might know that, and that trembles before him out of love, but also deep awe and respect for him. Wouldn't it be great to have a king like that? It's a complete portrait of a whole human being. mind, will, and heart, fully formed to reflect God's heart and character and righteous rule. And it contrasts to the kings of Isaiah's day really starkly. Ahaz, he lacked counsel. If you remember the story, he rejected God's Emmanuel sign and he ran to Assyria for help with his neighboring own people in the north who were threatening him. Shebna, who's an official that we'll learn about later in the story of Isaiah, uh, he lacked the fear of the Lord. He was building grand monuments to himself in the midst of all this inferno and chaos. Even Hezekiah, who in the story is pretty good, he stumbled in his wisdom. After God saved them from Assyria in the story, he decides to showcase his treasury, the temple treasury, to the Babylonian envoys who come sneaking around and who end up becoming the next global superpower after Assyria. Every earthly king in Isaiah's prophecy was exposed as incomplete, not enough, broken, making mistakes. But not this shoot from the stump of Jesse. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, for that is what sets him apart as God's king. The second thing that Isaiah shows us, if you're following on in your sermon outlines there, in verse 3 to 5, is that what this king does with this Spirit. He judges perfectly. And the striking thing is how he does it. Not by what he sees or hears with his eyes and his ears. He does not judge by appearances, by political calculation, by what is just advantageous to him. He judges with righteousness and for the poor and with equity for the meek of the earth. In the ancient world, justice was always bent towards the powerful. The poor had no voice. The vulnerable were always crushed. But Isaiah, he sees a king who cuts through these appearances and he delivers justice to the world that many people ignore. Not just his own people, but to the world. No human court had ever reliably delivered this, and sadly, none ever do. Thirdly, Isaiah 11, verse 4 is about the king's great power. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips, he will slay the wicked. The king does not just diagnose evil, he defeats it. He destroys it. And his weapon is not a sword, but his mouth, his word. And the result is that extraordinary vision of verses 6 to 9. The wolf lying down with the lamb, the leopard with the goat, the child playing over the cobra's den. It's not just kind of this warm, fuzzy feeling. It's not like it's not meant to be a kind of, I don't know, a warm, fuzzy feeling of just comfort. It's about peace, about cosmic peace, about creational peace. It's about complete created order restored. The violence and fear and even predation that marks our fallen world gone, reversed by the king's word. At this point, we think, man, this is too much. This is a huge vision. How could this possibly be fulfilled by an earthly king at this time historically in Isaiah? Perhaps these animals at peace are just metaphors of some of those warring countries around at the time becoming friends. It's a fair question. And there are partial fulfillments of that in the history of God's people at the time of Isaiah, when certain kings in the line of David, like Hezekiah, and later you may have heard of a guy called Zerubbabel, in the line of David, who come and bring part of this geopolitical peace. But the scope of the vision, a little child leading its hand in putting its hand in the viper's nest, the sea of the Lord's knowledge covering the earth, it strains just a political reading. It's the same with the idea of a king who's perfectly wise, perfectly righteous, filled with the Spirit, fearing the Lord. Is that humanly possible? Now, if you're a Christian, again, just like Aussies hearing about regenerating bushfires, you're probably thinking, of course, this is about Jesus. Tell me something I don't know. But just stop and ponder. It's actually something incredible. I'm told babies can recognize the voice of their parents, even when they're in the womb, before they've entered the world. Both Chantel and I, we find ourselves talking a lot to our new baby that's due in August. Isaiah 11 was like, I think, God's voice to his people thousands and thousands of years ago, that they would recognize him, their true king, when he would come in glory. When Jesus stepped into the Jordan River and was baptized, and the Spirit descended and rested upon him, the gospel writers, they want you to hear Isaiah 11. This was the moment, John says. The Spirit of the Lord remained on him, not temporarily, but permanently. One with the eternal Father and Spirit. Jesus was, as we know, the incarnate Son of God, perfectly reflecting God's wisdom and understanding, his counsel and might, his knowledge and fear of the Lord. Jesus judged perfectly. He saw the outward performance of the religious leaders. He saw the genuine faith of a bleeding woman who simply touched his cloak. He saw Zacchaeus, if you remember the story, up a tree, not as a corrupt tax collector, but as a son of Abraham, ready to come home. And we know he sees us too. He sees not the performance that we put on, he sees our heart. He sees not the reputation that we've built for ourselves or our external religiosity, but the real you. And he judges truly. And he defeated evil. The Apostle Paul in 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 8 wrote that the Lord Jesus would overthrow the evil one with the breath of his mouth. He deliberately echoes Isaiah 11 verse 4. The weapon is the same. It's his word, which he holds, which holds out to people. And we hold out too as we hold in our hands the Bible, reading it every day, speaking it to our souls, to our hearts, to our friends and families, and to our world. His word, the word of our loving King who once for all defeated sin and death when he died on the cross and rose again to offer life to all who turn to him. Do you recognize his voice as you read Isaiah here and as you read his word? In verses 10 to 16, after all that Isaiah has shown us about this coming king, Isaiah gives us one final incredible image of a king who calls. Verse 10 introduces another image. It's a changed image. It's a shoot. The shoot from Jesse's stump has become a banner, a standard raised high, visible from a distance, that the nations would rally to. In the ancient world, a banner was like a rallying point in battle, a signal of where to gather, a marker of where you found your people. Isaiah says it's the nations, not just Israel, the nations who would hear his call. The banner then turns into the image of this mighty hand, the hand of God. Verse 11 says, God will stretch out his hand a second time to reclaim his scattered people. This time, the first time was from Egypt. You know the story of the Exodus. But this time, Isaiah says, it will be greater from Assyria and Egypt, from every four corners of the world. God will stretch out his hand and gather his people home. And those nations that he mentions there kind of form a circle around as that first circle in a series of concentric circles that we know continue to spread. God is not waiting for his people just to find their way back. He is reaching. The same hand that parted the Red Sea, that led them through the wilderness, was extended again. This time further, this time wider. When Paul quotes verse 10 in Romans 15:12. He actually quotes that verse from Isaiah. He applies it directly to the Gentiles streaming into the family of God from every corner of the globe when they hear the good news about Jesus. The nations rally to that banner. And that is what is happening now in his kingdom. Every time someone far off is brought near to Jesus, Isaiah envisaged a great reclaiming of the nations, and that is what's happening. It's what's begun. Jesus was raised and exalted. His banner, so to speak, was lifted high, and God has not stopped reaching for people. And it's a personal truth too. You might think about it for yourself. You are not someone who found God by impressive searching. You didn't impress God by looking out for him and trying to find him. You're actually someone who God reached out to through whatever means of grace that was for you. Maybe it was a friend or a family member, a dream, a book that you read, or a person that you randomly met, your family. Or maybe it was a really hard experience that God used in your life to bring you to his son. Nowadays, it's like it's YouTube videos and TikToks and things that kids come across sometimes on the internet and are drawn to Jesus in his word. What was it for you? I got to share some of this point last week when we started our confirmation classes with the 9 kids that we're doing confirmation with in a couple of weeks' time. There was something really special about, I know it was a bit inconvenient for some. It was on Mother's Day last week when we started our confirmation class. And so I'm sorry for any of the logistics. That was hard for some parents bringing their kids to that first confirmation class. But there was something very special about reminding them that God had used their parents and their family to give them a home that they would never not know the love of Jesus. And now they get to see that and be thankful for that, to think about the truth of Jesus for themselves and confirm those promises in front of their friends and family. And as we know, God has not stopped reaching. Isaiah's vision in verses 11 to 16, they are still pushing forward to a future, a final, complete gathering when every exile comes home, when Jesus heals every division at his return, every scattered sheep reclaimed. And we're living between the hand stretched out and the hand finally drawing all things in. And we all play that part in it, don't we? And to finish, as we think about some application for ourselves. Firstly, if you're a Christian this morning and the world feels really overwhelming, if you look at the violence, the injustice, the corruption of our institutions, despite all the good that they are in many ways, maybe the moral confusion of our age, Isaiah 11 is a really great encouragement. It was written for people who felt exactly like that. People watching the Assyrian army march towards them. People who had seen everything they trusted cut down. This side of the cross and resurrection, we see that the shoot of Jesse has come. Jesus was raised. Jesus is the fullness of God with us by his Spirit. And Jesus, when he was raised and returned to the Father, he promised to return, to complete what he had begun. And his return is just not wishful thinking. It's actually just the next part of God's great story that has already been proven true. Its reliability across centuries of fulfillment. Hezekiah pointed to him. Isaiah pointed to him. Zerubbabel pointed to him. The exile and the return continue to point to him. Things in history that confirm that God is building his church. The cross and the resurrection arrived precisely as the prophets described. And Christian history testifies to God's faithfulness to build his church and be faithful to his people who cling to him. His return will come. And so hold on to that outstretched hand as a Christian. Cling to him, read his word, gather with his people, look to the great King more so than the corrupt leaders of our world. Not with gritted teeth, but with an open hand, confident that we know what the end of the story will be like. And lastly, Isaiah's vision of kind of cosmic peace, wolf with lamb, nation not lifting sword against nation, Lions eating straw. That was a crazy image. The earth full of the knowledge of the Lord as waters cover the sea. It's not just a beautiful picture of the future that we sit back and wait for. It is the reality we are called to partially embody now as his people in the overlap of the ages. When Paul quotes Isaiah 11, verse 10 in Romans 15, he does so in the context of Jew and Gentile learning to welcome one another across deep cultural and ethnic divides. You might remember that when we studied Galatians as well. The cosmic peace of new creation that Isaiah images and pictures and sees, it's tasted right now. Every time people who would not normally have human reason to be united together are drawn together and united under the banner of Jesus. Our church is meant to be a sign of that, a taste of that. This means that how you treat the vulnerable, how you treat the poor, the overlooked, the marginalized, is not merely just social concern. It's being like our King Jesus, and it's participation in his mission. The King who judges justly, with righteousness for the poor and equity of the meek. Every act of genuine kindness, justice, and peacemaking in his name is a signpost pointing to the world that is to come and how they can find that ultimate peace by responding in faith, repentance and faith to the one who died for them and rose again. For that is the only way they can have a taste of that eternal kingdom. And it's not merely a comfort. It is that green shoot that we see out in the foyer there. It's real. It's a kingdom we all live in now, under a new king. Think about those green shoots from the charred stump that I showed. That's been up there for the last couple of minutes. Pushing through the ash of the Bell's line of road. They were not the full forest. They were not the healed landscape, but they were real nonetheless. It was the new epicormic life. They were the future already arriving. That is what your life can be like. Rooted in Jesus, the true stump from Jesse. United spiritually to him by faith, growing in the Spirit who rested on him, gathered by the God who is stretching out his hand to even now reclaim a scattered people, living as signs of the peace that is coming. Friends, the King has come. The King is coming. And do you recognize his voice? Do you recognize